Everybody knows Sally Ride, the famous astronaut, made history by becoming the first American woman in space. Many of you may not know, some of you do, that since that time she has dedicated her life to getting kids interested in science, math, and technology. And we asked her to contribute her point of view to this discussion.
I'm Sally Ride. I'm an astronaut, and I'm also the president of a science education company called Sally Ride Science. I'm really pleased to be part of Connect a Million Minds. I think it's a very important initiative that has the potential for connecting kids around the country, students around the country, to the importance of science and math education to their futures. When I was growing up, I was always interested in science. So I took a lot of science classes. I just loved it. I was fascinated by it. I took math courses. I liked them. I thought I was going to become a scientist, and I did. I became a physicist. But just as I was finishing graduate school in college, planning to go on into a career as a physicist, I was sitting in the Stanford student cafeteria one morning reading the Stanford student newspaper and saw an ad from NASA that they were looking for applications for astronaut. And what could be cooler than that? It was something that I always dreamed of doing but never thought was possible. And then I realized when I looked at the ad that I was qualified to apply. I had the foundation in my science classes, my math classes. I had the background that enabled me to take advantage of that opportunity that really I had only dreamed about. And one of the things that we need to I think, help students understand is the importance in building that foundation as they're going through school. Elementary school, middle school, high school, these are where you're building the blocks that you're going to be putting together later on that actually let you become whatever it is you want to become, whether it's an astronaut, whether it's a video game designer, whatever it is. You need to have the educational background, often in science and math, sometimes in engineering, to be able to accomplish that. So we're looking forward to a great discussion. We'd like to open this to a discussion among the students about how you feel about building the foundation and trying to achieve your dreams.
A great football coach from Texas once said, luck is what happens when preparation meets opportunity. And you heard from Sally Ride, she had prepared herself so that later when an opportunity came along, she could seize that opportunity. Now, young people today may dream of being astronauts or maybe video game designers, but a lot of those same young people apparently are not making that connection always between the need to apply themselves in geometry class or algebra class today in order to prepare for the opportunities they want to seize in the future. And that has a name. It's called the STEM perception gap for the experts in this field. That's what they tell me. But we're going to try to focus on why this disconnect exists. And is it greater in the U.S. than in other countries? What can we do to help students connect those dots so they have the best chance of success and lay down that preparation foundation? To start the discussion, let's start with Stephen in New York City. Now, Stephen, I know that so many kids your age love to play video games, and sometimes talk about designing games. Do you think kids get the connection between preparing themselves with the kind of skills they need to maybe be video game designers in the future?
Well, a lot of kids my age are interested in becoming video game designers when they grow up. Like, you can see on the internet ads popping up every few seconds saying, hey, you want to be a video game designer when you grow up. But the thing is that kids my age also don't understand the math and science that go into making a video game. Like, there's a difference between playing video games and making video games.
Yeah, and how do you think we could connect those dots? Do you have any ideas on that?
Maybe introduced earlier on that you can take math and science courses to maybe introduce game design courses in schools.
Okay, that's a good idea, and we have one of the best video game designers in the world, Kudo Sonoda. What do you have to say to the comments you just heard?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting. Certainly when I was in school, I didn't have such a good perspective on how important just a fundamental like math background and science background was to actually getting games made. And a lot of what I actually do on a daily basis, as far as making the controls of a game feel good or making the way the characters act in a game, be something engaging for the people playing. It's all driven behind the scenes by a lot of, algebraic equations and, different kind of math tables and math ratios, and just being able to understand how numbers relate to each other is really what ends up making games fun. And, I think some of the most enjoyable time I've had working in video games has been working with different high schools and being able to bring kids in and actually give them a chance to get into the games that we're working on and actually use the numbers and show them how the numbers are really translating to what make games fun. And so it's I fall back on my the stuff I learned as far as my math experience in school, just every day in the job that I do. And I just think that's also the great thing, is being able to get kids into an environment where they can actually see how that knowledge of math is translating into something tangible and fun in something like an entertainment space like video games.
Yeah, that's really well said. The famous science fiction writer, the late Arthur C. Clarke, famously said, when technology becomes sufficiently advanced, it's indistinguishable from magic. And you could take that quote and look at this cool new game you guys have just launched, Connect, where people just use their hands to control the screen, and it looks a little bit like magic. But here you are, the creator of that, telling all of us, hey, there's a lot of math and science that goes into making something like that possible. It's not magic, it's math and science that advances technology. I want to go now to Dean Kamen, a good friend of mine. I've been in his home, and talk about magic, the Segway, and some of the other inventions you've made, Dean, are super cool. What do you think we ought to be doing to make sure that we have the next generation of inventors to come along behind you?
Well, I appreciate that great question, and I have appreciated all of your friendship and support over the years. In fact, I'll just make an observation. You started with a clip from the president, which ended with him saying, America, he's not going to accept being second. And as you know very well, you've brought our kids to the White House when you were there. We have an organization that we started nearly 20 years ago called FIRST, because our culture is obsessed by competition. But the problem is we focus on competing in football and basketball, and we wouldn't tolerate not doing well in the international competition of the Olympics, which again is a physical sport. Each of the speakers has used some sports analogy. A few moments ago, you talked about a famous coach. It is so embedded in our culture that sports is important, and we have such a free culture that kids are allowed to do whatever they want with their time. And in a free culture, you get the best of what you celebrate. That I think the way to fix the problem of being competitive in science and technology, recognizing that America, its strength is entrepreneurs and individuals and self-motivated people. These other countries probably are better at organized, structured ways to run their schools or get the kids to do things. I'm not sure we could or it would be desirable to change that in America. I think we go with our strength, which is create passion among kids, but we need to divert some of their passion from other sports to sports that will develop their skills in math and science. And through our FIRST program, now nearly 20 years old, with nearly 20,000 schools in it, it's coming very well. And just one more observation that a lot of very passionate people I know agree with me. Sally Ride just spoke. She was one of our early guest speakers at FIRST. Last year, the Secretary of Education, Arne Duncan, flew to the home of the 1996 Olympics, where we held the finals, the championship. And I think that impressed a lot of people about the commitment. I know that the Mythbusters have helped out and supported us. So people from government, people from industry, people from everywhere that get involved with a program like FIRST and see that it gives kids the same self-confidence and passion to study math, science, and apply it as they do to develop their muscles, their other muscles, not the ones hanging between their ears, are seeing that this could change the culture of this country and get us, I hope, back to being the country that always does well in the Olympics and always does well in football and basketball, but we're going to be the country that through developing passion among the tens of millions of kids, particularly women and minorities, is going to rise to that stature of being the most competitive country in the world in being innovative and creative with science and technology.
Well, thanks so much, Dean. And let's go back to Secretary Duncan. You mentioned him. Mr. Secretary, you know, I sometimes hear people say, isn't there some way to use the love kids have for video games and new technology to inspire them and use that technology more in education? Well, do you have any thoughts on that?
Two things. First of all, yes, I think technology can absolutely engage students in very different ways. And I think the idea of delivering educational content in math and science, not just 6 hours a day sitting in a classroom, but through video games, through cell phones, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, is a huge opportunity to accelerate the rate of learning. But I want to piggyback on Dean's work. I'm just a huge fan of that FIRST robotics competition. I think the disconnect, Vice President, that you talked about is that students don't see why this work is relevant to their lives. And those students on those FIRST robotics teams who are competing locally and then nationally, they're absolutely engaged. They get the huge connection between math and science classes and doing well in those competitions. I think he's obviously such a creative guy and has such genius in this area. To see the students love, to see their passion, to see how much they're enjoying those competitions, I think that level of engagement will help to close that gap that you talked about. It was interesting at that competition I went to, talked to many students, talked to many teachers. One teacher I talked to was a physics teacher who'd been teaching for 25 years. This was his first year coaching the robotics team. And he said it was by far the most rewarding experience he has had in his entire career as an educator. So I think Dean's onto something very special. We need to help him get that FIRST robotics competition into every one of our nation's high schools and even into elementary schools. But it's great for students, it's great for the adults, and I think it lets our students see the huge relevance between what's going on in class and what's going on in the real world.
We have a video question from Lancaster, Pennsylvania, I believe, from L. Rob. Is that right? Well, yeah, here we go.
Well, in my public high school that I recently graduated from, it's actually required for students to take only 3 years of math and science, but they have to have 4 years of English and history. So when a student wants to take electives or they want to have maybe less of a crazy schedule, it's actually by default that they can't take math and science. So I think that's kind of an issue because students who may be interested are actually being disincentivized, or science and math is being disincentivized for them by the school system itself. And I think that's a bit of a problem. What do you think about?
Well, I'm listening carefully to you, and the good news is that your comment has just been heard by leaders around this country who are able to take that into account. And I hear what you're saying. You know, we're talking about the cultural attitudes of kids and all of that, but when you have a kid who's really interested, the offerings have to be there. And now, I think, you asked me for my opinion, I think that also goes back to what Secretary Arne Duncan said at the very beginning, about having the resources available for good science teachers and math teachers so that school systems like the one where you're in school will be able to have those classes available and the highly qualified, motivated teachers to do that. So thank you very much for your questions.